Wuki said in battle, a major consideration is to locate the enemy commander and make a thorough assessment of his character. If you adapt your strategy depending on the type of enemy you face, you should be able to win the battle without too much effort. So this really goes to show that if you are in a business, a competition of sorts, where people are looking at you, you are expected to be a leader, this is something to take into consideration because you're constantly going to be being assessed for your weaknesses and weak points. If the enemy general is foolish and gullible, he can be tricked and drawn from his position. If he is a greedy and unscrupulous man, he can be bought with gifts. An enemy commander who is unable to adapt his strategy to the circumstances can be worn down gradually. When your enemy is led by rich, boorish commanders and manned by poor, resentful troops of the rank and file, you can exploit these differences. If the enemy is undecided as to whether to advance or retreat, you can frighten them into a rout. When the soldiers of an enemy army despise their commanders and think of defecting, you should block the normal accessible roads and leave the steep passes on. In this way, you can lead the enemy into the passes and destroy them. In an area where it is easier to advance than retreat, the enemy can be drawn into it. In places where it is difficult to advance and easier to retreat, the enemy can be pursued. When an enemy army is in a low-lying, wetland position with no way for the water to drain away and there is heavy rain, you should drown them by flooding the area. If your enemy is camped in a wasteland or bog where the grass is thick and secluded, then when the wind picks up, you can set a fire and burn the enemy to death. When the enemy has not moved for a while and their commanders and troops are off their guard, you can take advantage of their ill-preparedness and launch a surprise attack. So he takes into the use of spies from Sun Tzu, as well as the use of terrain, weather, positioning, and all of the natural conditions, and gives a great overview of all of the different ways that you can overtake an enemy. And so as you read this, you need to not only be thinking like, oh, these are great tactics, but also you need to be making sure to notate what not to do when you're in those positions. If you're in a bog, or if you're in an area that is easily flooded, or if you've been in the same spot for a while, or if your character is that of unscrupulousness, are you able to be bought? Are you gullible, right? These are the things that you need to perhaps work on, especially if you're choosing to be in a leadership position.